It's go time. We're going to hit record.
Done. Recording. Here we go.
We are recording. Welcome to Calling Women In. This is SheJumps Zoom. You are in the Zoom platform with SheJumps. Thank you for joining us. And we are hosting Calling Women In Snow Science tonight. This series is all about highlighting different careers that we are tied to and love in the outdoors. SheJumps does this because we are all about increasing the participation of women and girls in the outdoors. That is our mission. That's what everything comes back to. So you'll get a lot of those vibes throughout the conversations tonight. All these women love the outdoors and have a high priority for science, and they found their careers in it. And we are highlighting their stories here tonight. We have this priority because we love playing outside. At SheJumps, we are all about believing in the transformative play of the outdoors. This is the highest priority for what it is we do and how we come back to all of our events and programs. We're putting science first because it's so important. Feeling self-sufficient and empowered in the outdoors is a huge priority for us. We do this through all means of preparation and learning, and it all comes back to being able to have that incredible experience in the outdoors and coming back safely. Science first means that everyone learns building blocks of the skills that allow safe outdoor adventures, exploring wild spaces that shape and transform us into people we are meant to be. It's all really good stuff, and I'm so glad that you guys are here to join us tonight to hear these stories. The Calling Women In series is highlighting careers in snow science tonight, but we are doing this throughout many different seasons. Last week, we featured avalanche education. We'll be featuring wildland firefighting, arborist, professional athletes, all of that coming up this year. So we're very, very thankful to our panels tonight and all those that are joining us throughout the year for this series to tell their stories. Next up, so we really want to talk about our community snow science observation partnership. So SheJumps is partnering with CSO in order to bring science to the forefront through our different events and programs. And I'm going to have Katreen Nina jump in and explain how that tie-in is actually taking place.
All right. Thank you, Christy. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Apologies for any background noise here. I'm at the public library here up in Hinds, Alaska. So it might be a little bit noisy for a second. So we're here tonight to talk about snow. And we wanted to start off this presentation here just kind of highlighting why we care about snow. And hopefully what you see here on the screen, you've seen this graphic or something similar to this graphic before. We're having a throwback to elementary school to talk just very briefly about the hydrological cycle. The truth is, as we all know, that snow is a big part of the cycle. Even if you live far away from the mountains, you are strongly impacted by snow in various ways. We see snow accumulating in the mountains, and this snow is thawing in the spring, and it infiltrates into our groundwater. It percolates down into our soils, leading to runoff in our rivers, out to the ocean, and then it goes all the way back around again. So we care about snow because it's really the storage of water in our mountains during winter. You can go to the next slide. So snow matters, and there are various areas where we can see that snow has a big impact on our lives. These photos here on this slide is just kind of highlighting some of the things that we can relate to. Drinking water, of course, is a big one. Water irrigation is a huge issue and strongly dependent on snow accumulation in mountains to provide that water during the summer and spring seasons. Fisheries, big important industry that are strongly impacted by variations in snow accumulation in the winter season. Our forest health depends on water access, and so during drought year we can often see more wildfires and so forth. Then of course snow matters also for hazards. Big snow years often lead to a lot of avalanche occurrences in our mountainous regions. Very rapid snow melt in the spring also cause big issues such as flooding. So there are various ways that we can look at snow and how it matters to our lives. So with that brief intro here, we kind of know that we need to learn more about snow to understand how all this relates. And scientists use, well, there are various ways that we can globally and regionally take measurements of snow using satellites and aircrafts, but we can also take measurements on the ground. Static point measurements, such as weather stations, can measure snow, and we use those data points to keep track of snow accumulation in the mountains and thawing of snow in the spring as the snowpack reduces. But we as scientists also head out in the mountains and measure snow. But this is normally in terms of, pretty small research teams, and we try to cover as much ground as we can. But of course, we're limited about our group size.
So if you think about this, since we have these weather stations that are at fixed locations, and really there's a relatively small number of scientists out there, there's a bunch of alpine and remote mountain areas that don't have any on the ground snow measurements. And this is what brought about the Community Snow Observations Project. So Community Snow Observations, or CSO, is a NASA-funded research effort that's aimed at improving our understanding of high alpine complex, snow that's in this high alpine complex terrain all around the globe. Mountain regions around the world are relatively data sparse, so we rely on professionals and recreational citizen scientists to give us data. And this data is snow depth measurements. The CSO campaign recognizes that backcountry users are a really unique data collection opportunity. If you think about it, if you all are in the backcountry, you're typically going long distances and you're traveling over really large elevation gradients, and you're going into this complex terrain where you can't really put a weather station because of avalanches or pretty extreme weather that could happen there, and just access in general. So you may be wondering, what is citizen science? And while there's a lot of definitions out there of what citizen science is, one definition is that citizen science is scientific activities in which non-professional scientists volunteer to participate in data collection, analysis, and dissemination of a scientific project. So what does that mean? Really, citizen science can be done by anyone. Citizen science is awesome because it facilitates opportunities for the scientific community to connect with these communities that are impacted by the science that's taking place in your own backyard. And it's really easy to be a citizen scientist. Yep. Sorry. For CSO, there's really only 3 steps. So first, you need to go out somewhere in the backcountry where there's snow. And then you need a measurement device. So typically if we're in the backcountry, we all have our avalanche probes, although it could be really any measurement device if you have something else you'd rather carry. And then you just take a snow depth measurement at a given spot in a place where there's undisturbed snow, ideally not like in a snowmobile track, would be great. But then once you have this measurement, you enter it into our app. So Mountain Hub is the app that we predominantly use, although Snow Pilot is another option for you. If you also go to communitysnowobs.org, we have some detailed tutorials that kind of walk you through that process in a little bit more detail.
All right, so we just wanted to show here briefly some applications of the CSO project, and that will lead us into what we do as snow scientists. So what I do a lot for my job, we're using remote sensing techniques to gather information about snow. So we're basically mapping snow depth distribution. For you that are new to the term remote sensing, its definition is written here on the slide: the scanning of the Earth by satellite or high-flying aircraft in order to obtain information about it. So what this graphic here shows, we go out first in the summertime when we have bare ground conditions, and we fly with either a camera using photogrammetry techniques or a laser scanner. And we produce a digital elevation model of the surface. And then we go out again in the wintertime, at the time during the winter season that we are interested in, whether that is peak snow height or it's right before a big storm is about to roll in. And then we go out again after this big storm to study change from wind distribution of snow. That's one of our interest areas. And then we basically we subtract the ground surface from the snow surface to get the elevation difference. And that's how we get the snow depth. So here you see an example from a photogrammetry derived snow depth surface to the left. This is from Thompson Pass in South Central Alaska, April 2017. And darker blue colors are indicating deeper snow. And as you can see there, it looks like, a little bit more snow got deposited and accumulated by wind in some of those gullies. And then we were also on the ground measuring snow depth with our avalanche probes. And with those ground observations, we were able to compare the two and see how well they relate. And we can also use the CSO observations there to detect if there are any issues with the photogrammetry collection or with the LiDAR collection, whichever technique we're using. So it's kind of like a quality control measure. But when we can also use the other way around, LiDAR is a very reliable instrument, so we can use that to validate the CSO measurements the other way around as well.
And another really great application that we have for the CSO data is related to modeling. So models are really powerful tools because they allow us to fill in these gaps between individual snow measurements that would be taken either by a person or by a weather station. And this allows us to kind of see what that whole distribution of snow looks like across a landscape. So if you think about one snow depth measurement or a handful of them, they're taken just at a single point on a landscape. So this is what you see on the image to the left. Each of those green dots shows where a measurement was taken. And then the image on the right shows you a modeled output of snow on that same day across the entire landscape. So notice how the snow is now continuous without these large gaps. And we can also have modeled output at really high spatial and temporal resolutions. So where CSO comes into this is we get your citizen science snow depth measurements and we assimilate them into our modeling workflow. And this actually helps to improve the performance of our model in those places where we typically don't have ground measurements. So up in the complex terrain where people are recreating. Currently, we're also working to create a near real-time product with this modeled snow distribution data. So really, wherever you're measuring snow, you'll get kind of the best real-time data is our goal. And here is just the CSO information. CommunitySnowObs.org is our website with tutorials and more information about the project. And then you can also check us out on Twitter and Instagram.
And I also want to mention before we get into our personal talks here that McKenzie Skiles, who's on here tonight, she's one of our ambassadors, and we are really excited to have her on our ambassador team. Oh, Christy, I think you're muted.
Yeah, I am muted. You know, that's not the first time I've done that. That's okay. Better the second time around. We're going to kick off bios with you, Katreen.
All right. Okay, so yeah, so all of us are just gonna kind of go through our bios, our backgrounds, how we got to where we are today in our professions. So I work as a cryosphere hazard scientist for State of Alaska, Department of Natural Resources, Division of Geological and Geophysical Surveys. It's a mouthful. Cryosphere means the frozen environment. So we're focusing, or in my program that I'm in, we're studying hazards that are occurring in alpine environment that are related to changes in snow, in ice, glacier change, and also permafrost. I am from Sweden. You probably have a pretty strong accent. I did a Bachelor of Science in Geography at Stockholm University, and I did my last year as an exchange student at the University of Alaska, Fairbanks. So that was the first time I came to Alaska. And during that year, I took my level 1 avalanche course. I started to do more backcountry skiing and realized that in Alaska, you need some more training before you just head out the door. And that sort of spring semester, I kind of detected the subject of snow science and avalanche science, that it's something that you can actually study, college level and dig deeper into. So that spring semester, I guess, I decided to do a senior project in slush avalanches using synthetic aperture radar technology, and did some field work up in the Brooks Range in northern Alaska. And that kind of kicked off to what I decided to do for my master's level. I came back to Alaska for my master's, but I should also mention I met a man, of course, in Alaska, so that's a big reason what brought me back. But anyway, did my master's for environmental science at Alaska Pacific University in Anchorage. And the graduate project there, I was studying avalanche dynamics. So I was focusing on various avalanche flow behaviors, to put it very briefly. So for other, certifications, I mentioned level 1. I did my level 2 ARI training in Thompson Pass. That was kind of in between my bachelor's and master's. And I started helping out with some avalanche instructions for backcountry babes for a couple of winters. And I got my instructor training too after that. And then a couple other things, just wilderness first responders, pretty common training when you're in this sort of outdoor instruction, but it's also actually required for my official job with the state of Alaska. And then with the remote sensing work that we do, of course, probably all of you are aware that drones are becoming very popular, and we use them as well. So I got my drone pilot here a couple of years ago. Yeah, so I have mentioned already, we use a lot of remote sensing, and it comes in really handy here in Alaska because the landscapes are vast, and they're very inaccessible, and oftentimes we need to cover a lot of ground. So it's just a really amazing tools for us to use. And what you see here in the picture to the left is a GNSS base station. So it's global navigation system. Gosh, what am I missing? McKenzie can fill me in. So it's basically a GPS that's standing static on the ground that are collecting. It's basically, how should I explain this? It's collecting its location for a certain amount of time. So we let this GPS sit on the ground for the entire duration of our survey that we are flying with an aircraft or a helicopter. And that is our reference point. So, we have a GPS in the aircraft as well that is very, very precise and accurate, and it knows where it's at, but it doesn't really know where it's at relative to the ground. So the space station, we're correcting all the data to the space station that you see here in the picture on the tripod. That picture is from above Berry Arm Glacier in Prince William Sound, where we are studying a very large landslide that we are concerned might might release and cause tsunami in the Prince William Sound. So remote sensing is the major part of the type of field work that I do. It involves a lot of flying, setting up these base stations, and also collecting ground control points in the areas that we are surveying. But then, of course, a bigger part of my job is data processing and analysis. This photo here in the middle is from my previous house and backyard. You know, summer nights, you often take your computer outside, glass of wine, some snacks, you know, Friday night, whatever, 4 o'clock. That's a big part of the job, is being on the computer, and that's challenging when it's nice out. And then to the right, you get to see amazing landscapes. And when you're skiing around, I have here on my backpack is a federal course, snow course. This is what we use to measure snow water equivalent. And this is actually a picture from a field trip that I did with the PhD student that was with us, with CSO, before Nina joined the team. The picture is from Thompson Pass, and we were hiking up this, touring up this basin and measuring snow depth and SWE, and it was, you know, it's just beautiful when you're out there skiing around and you realize that you're doing this for your job. And I feel very grateful. That's it for me.
All right, well, a little bit about me. I'm originally from Colorado, where I grew up with my giant Chicano family. And growing up in Colorado, there was always snow around, but I didn't actually start spending time in snow or really thinking about mountains and snow as a good place to go until I was about 17. And that's when my now husband taught me to snowboard. I'm the first person in my family to pursue a career in science or engineering. So there has been and continues to be a lot of figuring out as I go. And this has also led to a fairly non-linear path to snow science, I would say. I kind of started my academic or a higher ed up at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, Canada. And when I was there, I completed a Bachelor's of Science in Human Kinetics, which is related to the human body. And then I took a bit of a hiatus from academics. So after university, I stayed up in BC, where I pursued a bunch of opportunities in snowboarding and avalanche training through the Canadian Avalanche Association. And this is the time in my life where I was just really kind of devoted to snowboarding and snowmobiling and just being out in the backcountry. And I think this is really what influenced my decision to change paths from human systems to Earth systems. And so to make this transition, I did have to do some additional coursework, but then I returned to graduate school and completed a Master's of Science in Geography at Portland State University. When I was there, I was a member of the Climate Science Lab, and I worked with Dr. Paul Luggeth. And this work brought me eventually to OSU, where I am right now, and I'm pursuing my PhD in water resources engineering. I am advised by Dr. David Hill, who is one of the PIs on this CSO project. So as a PhD student and a graduate research assistant, I think I definitely do a bit of balancing between coursework and research. My research interests are related to meltwater resource systems, so the water that comes from our snowpacks. And I also want to help improve our understanding of all the different ways that snow connects together different Earth systems. It's also really important to me through my work that I have opportunities to bolster scientific literacy, and I want to promote diversity and inclusion in science and engineering. And really my plan for that is through intentional and deliberate conversations and action.
Hi, everybody. This is the first time you've heard from me tonight, but I'm very excited to be here, and I'm so happy to be involved in the CSO program. I am an assistant professor in the Department of Geography at University of Utah, and I got to this. It took me a while to get to this step in my career. I originally grew up in Alaska, actually. And I have had snow in my life for as long as I can remember, and sort of just an enjoyment and love of snow. I've been skiing and snowboarding my entire life. And when I started my undergraduate, I was really interested in climate science. And I sort of started to focus on vegetation change. And then I discovered GIS and mapping, and I sort of just got sucked into this whole world of remote sensing and mapping and geography. And I ended up getting my undergraduate in geography and environmental studies at the University of Utah. And I'll note that when I first moved to Utah to go to school, I really just picked it because it was close to a bunch of ski resorts. So my focus was not originally on academics, but I got really interested in science and climate change. And then I met my academic advisor, Dr. Tom Painter, who was really at the forefront of sort of these really exciting remote sensing concepts of snow. And I realized that I could combine my love of snow with my love of science and climate science and earth science. And there was really no looking back for me after that. So I got my master's in geography, also at the University of Utah, and then went to University of California, Los Angeles to do my PhD, went on to work for NASA for a little bit, and then returned to Utah as an assistant professor now to start my own research group and hopefully pass on this love of snow and snow science to the students that I advise and undergraduate students that work in my group. So I'm a co-director of a broader snow and ice lab. We do both seasonal snow and glaciology in that lab. And then my group is the snow hydrology group. And we also use a lot of drones. If you want to go to the next slide, I think I have some pictures. I actually do field work. I'm lucky enough to do field work all over the world. This picture on the left is up in Greenland. I've flown on planes for NASA, flying over the Sierra Nevada, the Rocky Mountains, the Pacific Northwest. And really I can combine remote sensing or sort of remote data with field work, and then sort of use that to inform models, just sort of computer world, numerical models, to improve our understanding of how much snow is in the mountains, how much water is in that snow, when it will melt, not only when it will melt, but how much water will be coming out with it, and then how all of those things are changing over time, not only with climate change and climate warming, but with other factors like dust on snow, which is what I'm showing here. And if anyone has been skiing in Colorado or Utah in the spring, I'm sure you've seen dirty snow. So this is one of the things that I really focus on studying, is how this darker snow melts faster. And so that's what my research focuses on. And I'm excited to talk more about being a woman in snow science with Nina and Katreen.
There we go. So we're exiting presentation mode, and now you get to see our beautiful faces as we have this conversation amongst friends about snow science and the careers involved in it. Ladies, thank you so much for your backgrounds and bios. We covered a few of my first questions when it came to what you drew you to this career, how you began it, how you went through the education certification. And I'm wondering from that, what was the most appealing aspect about this profession? Like out of the gates, what was the most appealing aspect? Nina, you want to kick us off? Or McKenzie, you're unmuted.
I was going to say,
you go for it.
I'm unmuted, so I can go first, but.
Raise that hand. I got to tune my glasses in. There we go. I can see now.
Well, I already mentioned that I picked my undergraduate university because of its proximity to ski resorts. And I will just say that during my undergrad, I was skiing a lot. I think that in one class that I had more days on the mountain than I did in class, which is not a role model you should follow. But one of the things that drew me to this was the field work, was being able to work in the field, in the snow, and be able to do backcountry skiing and call it work. That was really one of the things that drew me to this.
Sounds like a win to me. I'm in for that game all day long. Nina, Katreen, do you have anything to add to this?
Yeah, sure. I think one of the things that was really appealing for sort of the academic route in snow science was sort of this opportunity to solve problems. I love problem solving, and I think I really did fall in love with mountains and snowboarding and snowmobiling, and I wanted to do it all the time, but I also really had always been drawn to science. And so I think something that's really fun that I didn't anticipate actually with this career is I love coding. And so you get this opportunity to sort of solve or work on this big Earth systems problem, but then you get these little micro problems within the realm of coding, and you get to solve those too. So I find that really fun.
Yeah, for me, I think I guess from a very young age, I always loved maps. And when we went on these, vacation drives with my parents, I would always sit in the backseat with the map book open and just follow the road until we got to where we're going. So kind of this, I always had at a very young age an interest in geography and studying flags and countries and cities and all that stuff. But then when I came a little bit older, I was never really a science person until a little bit later on. And I was never good with math or physics or chemistry, none of that. But geography really spoke to me because it was more about understanding processes. And natural hazards to me then came kind of naturally. So before I got into avalanche science, it was more of like landslides and debris flows and anything that comes down the mountain basically, and just kind of how that relates to people, how people are affected. So infrastructure and buildings and so forth. So that's kind of the route that led me into it. I'm just seeing changes in the mountains.
Awesome. In that same vein, what were some of the most, when it came to challenging aspects, when you first started and as you progressed through your career? Right out of the gates.
Yeah, I'll let someone else go first this time.
Yeah, I think for me, early on, one of the biggest challenges was just figuring out how graduate school worked. The admissions process was really different than undergrad. And I didn't understand how research worked in the realm of universities, and that's what your professors are doing. And so I think figuring that out took me a minute. But then I feel like something, when I read this question originally, I was thinking about, this question really spoke to me because I feel like one of the biggest challenges that I faced really has to do with identity. And the reason for that is I feel like in my Chicano family, there's this very communal, family-centric sort of culture, whereas in snow sports and academia, it's like a very independent culture. And so it's kind of contrasting for me. And so I've really struggled with this feeling of only showing up with half of myself in either of these spaces. So basically not having room to bring my whole self and just feeling conflicted about that. And so I've definitely been working on strategies to get better at this, but it's definitely challenging just because I've kept these parts separate for so long. And I guess ideally in my career, I hope that part of what I can do is build more of an inclusive community where someone 5 years down the road kind of can walk in with a better or like more of a sense of belonging, just because of like a cultural shift.
That's good. That's a theme that comes up a lot in these conversations. Thank you so much for being honest and sharing your heart on that, Nina.
I think that I I mean, I don't have quite the same perspective, but I think that the challenge in academia and getting into academia is that it is really insular and single and independent, and people are very competitive. And so, especially as a female, you don't always feel like you fit in that space necessarily, because especially snow science is very male dominated, very kind of like this kind of older white male dominated space that can be hard to like feel like you can get your footing in. And be confident in, because even if you're there, speaking up is a whole nother thing. And so I think that's a big challenge in the field. And I just say, I think to people who are working their way through, you kind of just have to be confident in yourself, and don't necessarily look to those people for reassurance, but just be self-confident. And it's, I think a lot of it is persistence and self-confidence, and that can be hard to find, but I think we need to change the culture of academia to be more inclusive and be more welcoming. And that's also one of my goals. And snow science in particular. We need more women.
Yeah, I guess for me personally, I often feel that I'm lacking some sort of background knowledge, whatever it is. Like when I started working with remote sensing, I strongly felt that I missed physics, physics knowledge, and but then you realize that you just have to give it some time, and you can learn a lot along the way, even if you're missing certain understanding. Initially you get over that hump. So that's something I realized throughout the years. Another challenge, I agree with Nina, with grad school, that was quite hard, because for me, when I started grad school at APU, it was there was no I didn't join a lab. I didn't join somebody else's project. I set it up myself. So I had to find ways to make it financially. So I ended up, applying for a lot of small grants from kind of unexpected sources. And I'd like to share that with the listeners here today. There was one little grant from, Avalanche Canada Foundation. One was from American Avalanche Association. One was from American Alpine Club. All these outdoor organizations, they all have research grants that you can apply for. And so, when they all stack up, you can actually make a living and make it work. And then, you might have an advisor who has a project that you can do some contract work for and get paid that way. Or TA, of course, is a way to make some tuition waiver that way. But it was a lot of that, extra stuff to get through to make it.
When it comes to the role of mentorship, is there any personal stories you can share? How has that played? Has it played a large role in how you progress in your career?
Katreen, maybe
Anybody?
you go first, because you haven't gone first.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Let's do that. For me, definitely, there's been several individuals that were really important for my graduate level work. One of them, David Hamry, he's the former Avalanche director for Alaska Railroads, and he's been in this sort of the Avalanche community for a very long time. And him and I kind of worked together to formalize my research questions. And it became a mentorship because it was a very mutual interaction, I guess. It was, he wanted something out of this project, and I wanted a project where, the goal was to help the avalanche forecasters that are trying to do a better job forecasting avalanches. So it was not just I was working on a science project that nobody cares about. This is information that he needed for his job, and I worked hard to make sure that he knew that he was very valued, and that his expertise and his observations throughout the years could help me to do better research as well. And so that continued beyond the graduate project, where he hired me to do some contracting work, and every once in a while now we bump into each other at conferences, and it's a lot of respect. And because I really agree with McKenzie, it's a very, older men dominated world, both snow science and avalanche science. I would say it's changing rapidly, but it's still kind of like that. And it can be very intimidating. But that relationship with him was different because I felt that there was that mutual respect. So that always felt really good.
I think it's just building off what Katrina said. It's really important to find the people that can support you and be collaborative and have this relationship of mutual respect, because not all relationships in snow science necessarily will be like that. Some people are really competitive, or but building that community of support and finding mentors that will support and give you feedback and sort of support you through your career stage is really, really important. And I had an amazing graduate advisor. I would not be here without him, but going along with the theme of this call, I mean, I think that I sought out female snow scientists to have these people that I could, they're doing the job that I wanted to do. I could see myself doing this job because there were other women doing it. So like Susan Kaspari at Central Washington University and Jessica Lundquist up at Washington State were people that have played, they weren't my graduate advisors, but they were really important people who were mentors to me along my career and still are. And those were the people, you really have to seek them out and keep those relationships going. It's active on both sides, I think. And that's like the best advice I can give when people are seeking out sort of relationships and communities, is that it takes time. It's cultivation. It's sort of spending time finding those people and finding your community.
One of the terms that came up in our avalanche education talk last week was friend-tours. They are friends and mentors, relationships. They take time and investment, and that's what a mentorship is. And I think that gets a little confusing sometimes when folks are like, now I bestow you as mentor. It's more than that, and it goes in many different ways. Nina, do you have anything to add on that vein? Or
no, I feel like they covered it pretty thoroughly.
They did a great job. In that same thread, is there a time that another woman encouraged you or possibly challenged you that helped really push you forward in your career?
I guess when I was doing my master's, my advisor was male, but I actually had the opportunity to work with my first female mentor ever. And her name was Kelly Gleason. And I'd expressed interest, she was another professor at the university, and I had expressed interest in getting involved with some of her field campaigns. And I think she'd really gone out of her way to create an opportunity for me to do that, and really took me under her wing. And I think I really had a lot of doubt of if I could do the PhD path next. And she just was really encouraging and real about it, which was also useful, talking about how challenging it could be at times, which I think is important also. But it was sort of became that sort of friend-tour type relationship, which I just really appreciate.
Awesome. So one thing we like to talk about when it comes to our outdoor play or any aspect of life really is the element of mental fitness. And I was wondering what you guys feel makes you afraid or uncertain when it comes to your profession. What elements give you heebie-jeebies, possibly?
I think. Oh, sorry, Katreen, go ahead.
No, you go, please.
No, I was just gonna refer to something that you had already said, and that's like background, just having an educational background. And that is, so we both have geography-based backgrounds. It's not physics, it's not, engineering. And so having the uncertainty of like, do I have this hard science background to be doing the work that I'm doing. And I just think Katreen put it perfectly earlier, is that with enough time and belief in yourself, you can learn anything, I think. And so that's all I was going to say.
Yeah.
No, that's great. Of the tools and activities, what do you use to combat stress in your job? There has to be some stress. And what are your methods to deal with it?
Well, so this week I'm in Haynes for landslide emergency response, and it's been a hell of a week. Sorry, my language. It's been like 13-hour work days and very stressful. But every day I make sure to get, a 10-minute yoga session in the morning and just sit with a cup of coffee, and I have a journal that I just write a few lines every morning and every night. And that's just, it's amazing how those small things make a difference. So I've been very grateful for those routines here this week. On a normal basis, I always make sure to get outside at noon to see some sunshine. Alaska gets very dark. So you just get out and get that D vitamin for an hour, whether it's a walk or a run or a quick ski, whatever it is. Like, you're never too busy to get that break in the middle of the day. So that's, I hold very strong to that. You can always come up with excuses, but your health really is what everything relies on. So
You don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of anything else.
that's right.
All us moms know that.
Yeah.
Does anyone else want to chime in on their de-stressing routines?
I think mine is, well, mine's quick. I think building up Katreen, getting outside, so important. Exercise can work wonders. 10 minutes or an hour, it doesn't matter. If you get outside and get some exercise, or even just do yoga inside, it's wonderful. But another thing that I do, I'm a big reader. So being able to do 15, 20 minutes of reading at night before I go to bed is huge. And I'm a big science fiction and fantasy fan. So it's kind of like getting out of my science headspace that I'm in and going into a totally different world for me is just, that does wonders for me. So that's one of my main routines.
I feel that. Of the aspects in your job, what do you find most fulfilling or empowering? I can take a few guesses from what we've talked about, but I'm gonna let you guys answer.
I feel like I already talked over people, so I don't want to go first. I'm nominating Nina to go.
Yes, I think it's really probably the opportunities to I think it's really fulfilling when you can build tools that have an application. I think that's one thing that's very tangible and fulfilling. And I think it's really empowering when you get to connect with other communities outside of science. I think that's been one of my favorite things that has really been yes, this is the track I want to be on.
Yeah, I agree. Whenever you work with people that are more of sort of practitioner side of things, in my job, we work closely with avalanche forecasters. So they're forecasting avalanches for, an electric company or railroad or highway, whatever it is. And we have a lot of close collaborations where we will fly remote sensing and provide snow depth distribution maps. And, anytime we get the results to them and they're just so excited to see all these things on this colorized, beautiful figure. And they're like, oh my God, I had no idea there was so much snow in those gullies, or that totally makes sense. Or, you just see their eyes just lightening up. That's super rewarding, that all the science you've been doing, and then you get this human, gratitude. It's just awesome.
I think I'll just quickly add, in my career, I kind of moved, from from doing a lot of field work to doing a lot of computer work, and becoming a graduate advisor, doing a lot more work writing proposals and sort of funding science instead of necessarily doing a lot of science myself. But what's really rewarding as a part of that is being able to watch my students become scientists, and watching them sort of work through this process of research and snow science. And that has been incredibly rewarding and almost makes up for not being able to get out in the field as often.
Oh, I love it. I have one more of my questions, and then we've got a ton of really great questions from all the folks that are watching here tonight. So I'm going to finish with, what piece of advice would you give a young person interested in pursuing a career in snow science?
I would say very shortly, there are many ways to get there. So don't give up on it. That's really it. And it takes time, and it can sometimes be very random. It can be, just running into a person at a conference, or it can be a coffee conversation with somebody. It's funny how it works sometimes. Unexpected things happen and you meet people. It's a lot about people, actually, building networks.
Yeah, I feel like what I was thinking of is kind of related, because I think it's sort of finding people that can build a positive and inclusive space around you. I think also, if you're just getting into the academic side of things, really making sure you spend the time to actually interview potential advisors to see if they're a good fit for you. That's something that I think a lot of people, I've seen that the dynamics just aren't always great, but you can not only interview potential advisors, but you can talk to people in the lab. And I think it's worth doing that to make sure it's the kind of setting you want to be in. And also, just don't be afraid to reach out if it's something that if you don't know what you need to do, ask the admissions committee at the school or reach out to people in the lab. I feel like people are really open to answering questions.
Yeah, I would just add, there's a lot of different avenues into snow science, and those range from being an avalanche practitioner to being, sort of on the academic faculty side, like I am, and all of those kind of have different pathways. So depending on what you're interested in, don't be afraid to ask questions. And I think a lot of it has to do with like fear, or if I send an email, it's going to be silly, but don't have that fear. And then if someone doesn't answer your email, don't be afraid to follow up, because especially from my perspective, I get, sometimes hundreds of emails a day and sometimes don't get to all of them. And I'm never offended if someone says, hey, you didn't answer my email. Just send it again. And, just say like, I'm really interested in snow. For me, I think that like students that are interested in working with me, I want to see that they're excited about snow. So lead with that. Like I think, don't be afraid to say, or to be excited about what you want to do, and make those, kind of get out there and make those connections. It can be intimidating, but it pays off.
So what I'm gathering is you be an excited squeaky wheel and it will pay off. Lead with that passion. We have got a lot of questions, both in our chat and the Q&A. We've got about 6 minutes left here in the presentation, but if panelists, if you want to be checking this out while we ask these last few questions, and then we're going to definitely stay on and make sure that these get answered as well, folks. So do not fret. But I'm going to ask one that's been asked a few times, as far as how much time you spend in the field compared to how much time you spend in the lab or non-field work. I know with careers in the outdoors, most people think that we're outside playing all the time. And the reality is I'm in front of the computer 90% of the time. So don't know about you guys, but would love to have that put into context.
It's probably a little bit different for like Katreen versus I, or like Nina versus I. I mean, I know during my PhD, I did a ton of field work. I lived at my field site. I was digging snow pits every day. And now it's more, I'm lucky to get out with my students or do a training session, maybe 5 or 6 times every season. But living in Salt Lake City is a huge benefit. I get to go to the mountains all the time. So the amount of field work that I do for my job is now not quite as often as I did during my PhD, but I think Katreen probably gets out in the field more than I do.
Yeah, it varies a lot actually, depending on projects that we have going on. And it depends a lot about things that just come up. We're experiencing a lot of crazy events right now up here in Alaska due to climate change. And the mountains are basically falling apart, to put it very dramatically. And that adds a lot of field work to what we normally do. I'd say on a normal winter without these urgent emergency responses, it would maybe be like, I don't know, maybe 3 weeks or 4 or a month total of field work in the winter. And then maybe a couple of weeks in the summer, and then maybe a week here and there in the fall and spring. So, but then, it varies depending on what's going on.
Very good.
Yeah. Our fieldwork was canceled last winter with all of the COVID things. So looking forward to this winter, but a lot of computer time.
All right, we got a question from Ruth. What kind of opportunities are there to do this kind of work and field work that aren't solely academia? So participating in CSO would be the first one I can think of. And maybe you guys want to explain a bit more of what the ambassadors do, because that was a question earlier.
Yeah, I just replied here with a written response real quick. It really depends on the interests of the ambassador. So some of our ambassadors prefer to just collect a lot of data, and because they, we might have recognized them like, oh, this person is collecting a ton of data. Maybe this person is interested in becoming an ambassador, and they say yes. And that might be most of their ambassador role, is being out in the mountains and collecting data and kind of sharing the world, spreading the word that way. Some of our ambassadors might be like a professional athlete who has a lot of exposure and is interested in taking on that role of having a sort of public face for CSO and collecting data for our program. So yeah, it kind of varies. So then also we have like McKenzie, who's a professor and talk a lot about the importance of snow at various presentations and workshops, and mentions CSO. That's a great way for us to advertise CSO, to kind of make that link to citizen science. We have a lot of people on our ambassador team that are sort of involved in academia because of that role. So it really depends what of the interest of the ambassador.
And I hand out a lot of stickers. So if you're interested in a CSO sticker, you should find your local ambassador and find out where they might be, because there's a lot of swag involved in CSO as well.
We've got a question here from Elizabeth, who is a middle school 8th grade teacher in science. I teach chemistry, physics, and weather. What are some connections that you might have made as a younger student that encourage you to pursue a passion for snow science? Really, how do I motivate my students to pursue these studies? Any advice?
I have one. I kind of built a career studying the impacts of dust on snow, which is not like something that people immediately think about. And just, really quickly, it's really intuitive, especially if snow is one of the brightest surfaces on Earth. If dust deposits on it, it gets darker, it absorbs more sunlight, and it melts faster. And this links directly back to land use change. When we change how we use the land surface, there's more dust produced, and to climate change. As it gets warmer, there's more droughts and more dust. And this is one of those sort of indirect impacts that's not just warming temperatures, it's really influencing snow as a water resource. And that just like, when I started learning that process, it like clicked, and I was like, it's not necessarily just warming temperatures, it's more complicated. And I was just so fascinated with that whole feedback process. And so that was the one thing that for me was like, went a little bit deeper, and I got really interested in snow science.
I think as a teacher, bringing your students outside and have them look at snow and how snow can be so different throughout the season, that can be a really cool way for students to kind of understand snow processes.
I was working with middle school age students out in the Tetons for a little bit, and I feel like the students really got engaged when they were doing snow pits. Like, so again, going out in the field, but actually looking and seeing that there's more to snow than just a white blanket. I think once you start really looking deep into it, there's all sorts of exciting things. And of course, playing, like just playing in the snow makes it more exciting.
Absolutely. When you're able to make that connection between you're actually learning something, but you're playing. That's the beauty of it. That's what we're constantly striving for at SheJumps, that's for sure. They don't even know they're learning right now. Oh, well, we are at time. We are going to take a bit of time to answer these questions in the chat. But I want to thank everyone for tuning in tonight. Thank you so much to our panelists for joining this conversation, for being honest about your experience and sharing with everyone that we have here tonight. Is there anything you'd like to share in our closing? Any last bits of advice?
Collect data for us, become citizen scientists. And you'll experience too, once you start measuring snow, especially when you come back to the same spots, that it changes, and you'll start to realize how varying snow is. It's really cool when you do it from winter season to winter season. So it's really fun to do it as well.
I would say just keep loving snow and being involved. And if you're interested in snow science, then you reach out or chat with people and figure out which pathway works for you.
So thank you so much, everyone. We will be sending out a full recap of this, including the recording, a blog, which will have resources, everything from educational tips, links to our friends that we work with SheJumps, building in those programs with your kids or your classroom, or even just your friends in your backcountry group, full guide to CSO and how to really participate as a citizen scientist. And to wrap everything up, I am going to announce the winner. We have an Arc'teryx backpack that we're giving away tonight. And after going through all of the 215 submissions, Daphne DeJohn, you are the winner. So I will be contacting you via email and we'll be getting that shipped out to you. Thank you so much again for everyone tuning in tonight, and be on the lookout for that fun little recap email that you can share with all your friends and family. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight.